Tiffany Callender with the Horizon Foundation. Welcome to this webinar on how you can host your own Speakeasy Howard Advanced Care Planning Workshop. Speakeasy Howard is a local Howard County campaign designed to encourage residents to begin thinking about their healthcare wishes if they were unable to speak for themselves. That could happen to any of us at any time due to an accident, an illness, or anything really. And so we're going to walk through how you can host events where you can encourage residents to begin taking these important steps. This webinar will first provide a brief introduction as to what a Speakeasy Howard workshop is. Then we'll walk through some of the content that you should make sure you cover in your own workshop. And then lastly, we'll revisit some of the logistics about how you can host the event yourself. So what exactly is a Speakeasy Howard workshop? Well, the workshop is really an opportunity for residents to learn about the Speakeasy Howard campaign and begin thinking about their healthcare wishes. Again, the campaign really encourages anyone in Howard County to start thinking about the care you would want to receive if you can no longer communicate your care wishes to your doctors. And this workshop can be hosted by any individual and any organization. So this just shows you one brief photo of what a workshop might look like. You see individuals are clustered around tables and they're talking about some of their care wishes. And during this webinar, we'll walk through what exactly this workshop includes and how you can do one yourself. And so the first segment that you should cover during your workshop is why is advanced care planning important? Why is this a topic that anyone should even show up to consider? Well, this quote from Dr. Atul Gawande really sums it up well. It says, "Our ultimate goal, after all, is not a good death, but a good life to the very end." And that's what Speakeasy Howard is trying to encourage residents to be able to do, live their own very best life to the very end by communicating what their care wishes are. So let's look at some of the national data as to why this is important. 90% of people surveyed say they think it's important to have these conversations. 9 out of 10 of us say we want to make sure we tell our family, our loved ones, and our doctors about the care we would want if we couldn't communicate for ourselves. But only 30% of people have actually done so. And here in Howard County, it's not that different. We did a survey in 2016 of Howard Countyans and asked, do you have an advance directive? Some of you may be familiar with what that is, but an advance directive is just a document where you write down exactly what we're talking about here, where you document what your care wishes are if you would be unable to speak for yourself. And as you can see, only 1 in 3 people in Howard County has done this as well. So we see an opportunity for our residents and for all of us to do better about planning for our future health care. So the next bit of content you might cover in your workshop is why don't we want to talk about this? Why do so many people fail to plan for their advanced care? Well, I think a lot of us won't be surprised to realize that most people just find it to be an unpleasant topic. These are quotes that were actually gotten from residents who conducted or completed focus groups with us a few years ago, and they shared exactly why they consider this to be such an unpleasant topic. It's not the most comfortable thing to think about. Some of us realize it's important, but it's not really high on the to-do list. Life gets in the way. Some people, understandably, just don't like to think about death. We don't like to think about ourselves being in a situation where we can't speak anymore. And so we just don't like to plan for those types of scenarios. We also hear people saying, well, I'm just going to rely on my family members to know what to do. For example, individuals that have multiple children may say, my children will just decide for me. But what you may not realize is that your children may not agree on the type of care you should receive if you can't communicate for yourself. And that's an extraordinary burden to put on your family, to have to try to figure out and to wade through what your wishes might be if you haven't shared that with them. Another couple that was participating in the focus group said they were sitting down having dinner, and one of them said, I want everything, keep me alive no matter what. And the other said, well, I don't want anything. And they were relying on their 2 teenage children at the dinner table to not only remember, to be able to act on those wishes. And those children weren't even 18, so they couldn't legally actually serve as the person's spokesperson if something were to happen to one of those parents. So again, it's important to not just rely on your family members, but to actually take some time and steps toward this. I often share this anecdote during the workshops that I host, and you can share your own stories as well, but both of my parents, neither of them had had this conversation. And so my father was sitting down and he said, well, I would just want you to do everything for me. I would always want everything done. And my mother said, well, I would not want anything done. I would want you to just let me have a natural death. I don't want any medical intervention. And so both of them were assuming that the other one would know what they would want, and really they didn't. It was important for them to have that conversation. So we all have, I think, some story that we could share or bring to the table here, but it's just important to point out that we can't always rely on people knowing instinctively what our wishes might be. Some practical questions. Where do I begin? Do I need a lawyer? Do I need the documents to be notarized? Many people may not have the finances to either hire a lawyer, to get a notary public, and so that may prevent them from wanting to start these steps. There's also a concern about hospitals or healthcare providers being able to find those documents. And that's a very real concern because an individual may take the time to do their advance directive or to complete their documents and then feel like the healthcare community will never be able to find them. Lastly, people sometimes feel that if they complete some type of directive, they write down all of these wishes that they want, and then they change their mind in future, they're going to be committed to those previous decisions. And so there is a bit of fear with people completing this entire long advance directive with many, many specific care preferences that they then want to change later on. And that fear oftentimes prevents us from acting. So you've taken the first 2 segments of your workshop to set the stage, identify why the data is important, to talk about some of the data here in Howard County, and to also acknowledge that this is a tough subject for a lot of people, and many folks just don't want to talk about this. So now we dig a little bit more into what the Speakeasy Howard campaign does to help our residents face this topic and begin to take some first steps. Well, we mentioned an advance directive a little while ago. As many of you probably know, the advance directive is the document where you would put down your actual care preferences. You would say, this is the type of medical intervention I would want in a certain healthcare situation where I'm no longer able to speak. That again could be perhaps you're in a coma, perhaps you have a terminal condition that's reached a certain stage. You can be very specific with your care preferences. And those specific care preferences are actually what's considered a living will. Also, as a part of your advance directive, you can take a step of what's called naming your healthcare agent. And that's the person who your healthcare providers will talk to make the decisions about your care if you are unable to speak. That person really becomes your voice when you don't have a voice. And so when we think about the data here in Howard County, when we say 1 in 3 people has done their advance directives, a lot of people are not taking these steps for the exact reasons that we mentioned. And so what the Speakeasy Howard campaign did is we asked healthcare providers. We said, we know that 7 out of 10 adults here in the county don't have any of this documentation. What do you recommend that we encourage people to do that will help you honor their wishes, that would help you honor their advanced care planning preferences? And what all the healthcare providers said is if I just know who to call, if I just know who that person's agent is, and I know that that person has spoken with their agent and shared what their care preferences are, well, that helps me as a doctor, as a nurse, as a healthcare provider. It helps me tremendously on the road to honoring that person's wishes. And so that's why the Speakeasy Howard campaign helps residents take those first 2 steps: sharing their care preferences, sharing their wishes, talking with your loved ones about what matters to you, and then appointing your healthcare agent. And what matters to you may just be you sharing the value and the quality of what life is for you. That may be you saying, if I can't dress myself, if I can't recognize my children, if I no longer know who you are as my spouse, well then that to me means I'm no longer having a quality of life. Just giving your loved ones that bit of clarity can help them make decisions for you. If you're in a situation where doctors can say to them, we could keep your father or your husband or your brother alive, but he won't be able to recognize his children. He won't be able to dress himself, feed himself. Well, if you've had those conversations about what matters to that person, it will help you as the agent make decisions for them in that time. And so that's where the Speakeasy Howard campaign really focuses, acknowledging that some people will want to complete a living will, some people will want to write down those care wishes, some people will want that documentation, perhaps because of an illness, perhaps you've had children and you want to do that document. Absolutely, we want you to. But as a first step, we want every adult in Howard County to at least take those first 2 passes at sharing their care preferences and naming their agent. And again, this is what the Speakeasy Howard campaign is all about, making sure we're heard even if we can't speak for ourselves. Speakeasy Howard offers an easy-to-use website that begins residents on this journey. What you'd see if you visit the website is a series of 6 questions just to start. And those questions ask you about some of your care preferences. For example, question 1 says, as a patient, what do you want to know about your care? And you answer that question, and then a few others pop up. And really what it does is it again is helping residents take those first steps of thinking about their care wishes. And then what we're going to ask you to do on the website is to name your agent. To do that thing that your healthcare providers has told us really helps them honor whatever your wishes are in a situation when you can't speak for yourself. Make sure they know who to call and make sure you've talked to that person about what your wishes are. So we've taken some time to set the stage, we've shared data, we've acknowledged that this can be a tough conversation for people, and then we've also given a little bit of an introduction to the Speakeasy Howard campaign here in Howard County and why this is important. So now, the individuals that have come to your workshop, they've shown up really to start taking some time to really think through their own preferences, and they really want to purposefully think about how they would have these conversations with their loved ones. And so we want to take the next segment of time to talk about how you would do that with them. On the Speakeasy Howard website, in addition to those 6 questions that begin you thinking about your preferences, and in addition to asking you to name your agent, we have a document here called the Conversation Starter Kit. And the kit is something that we were able to use in our partnership with the Conversation Project. Conversation Project is a national group that really focuses on making sure that everyone's healthcare end-of-life wishes are expressed and then also respected by the healthcare community. The Conversation Project completed that starter kit and has made it available to communities to help individuals begin having these important conversations. And so we'll take some time during our Speakeasy Howard workshops to start thinking about some of these conversations and using some of those tools. Something you may want to include at the start of this portion of your workshop is a video courtesy of the Conversation Project with Diane Sawyer. In this 5-minute video, it chronicles a family that has done exactly what the people at your workshop are here to do. It shows a family that's sitting down, having their conversations about their end-of-life wishes and sharing with one another. It's a good way to set the stage, so it's something you might consider including here. And then after we show the video, we ask people to reflect. Were there things that they liked, things that they didn't like, anything that surprised them? Anything that make them feel a little uncomfortable? Again, we know this is a topic that some people find uncomfortable. We take a little bit of time to reflect during this part of the workshop. So it's something you may want to do as well if you choose to show the video. And so at this point, we use those booklets that I mentioned, the Conversation Starter Kits from the Conversation Project. How this works. This is the period in the workshop where we're going to do a little bit of an activity. We're going to actually take some time to write down, think through, reflect, and begin individually and personally considering what our own wishes are and taking some time to process that. So let's set some ground rules at this point in the workshop. We ask people to make sure that they keep whatever shared in the room in the room. If someone shares a personal story about an end-of-life experience that they had, don't go out and share that with someone else. Also, we encourage people to listen, be present. This is why we're really in the room at this time, is to start thinking about some of this. And so we want to make sure everyone's focused. We also ask people to enter and to be in the space as a person and not as a title. For example, perhaps you're holding this workshop at a healthcare community where you have physicians, nurses, nurse practitioners, technicians, administrative staff. Perhaps you have a lot of different roles in the room. We want people to be present as an individual and not as the role that they play. We don't want physicians to be physicians telling others how they should have their conversations. We want the physician to be the person in that room thinking about how they would have their own conversation. And identify any other ground rules you need to set. And so this is where we dig into the actual conversation starter kit. You'll see this slide starts on step 2, which says get set. There is a step 1 where you would identify what you hope to get out of this time, why it's important for you to bring these conversations up now. It's not that we don't want individuals to go through that part of the book, but for the interest of time, we get people started right away and actually thinking about their own end-of-life care wishes. And so we ask people to turn to page 3 and get their pens ready, because we're actually going to sit down and take about 10 minutes or so to let people answer these questions for themselves. So a lot of the scales that you see on pages 3 through 5 look like this. And we ask people to rate themselves where they fall on the scale. There's no right or wrong answer, it's just to help you think through your own care wishes. So for example, you'll see question 1. How long do you want to receive medical care? Again, you just place yourself where you might fall on that scale based on what your wishes might be. And for those of you who might remember the Speakeasy Howard website, you'll recall that we had 6 questions that look similar to these. Well, again, in partnership with the Conversation Project, we were able to take some of these questions right out of the starter kit and include it on the Speakeasy Howard website, just as a first pass to get individuals started thinking about this. But the kit is really where you're going to see a lot more questions and give you a little bit more time to digest and process what your wishes might be. We also acknowledge that this is not a clear-cut black or white issue. And so people may want to put an X in between 2 numbers, and that's perfectly okay. Again, it's really for you to begin thinking about your own wishes. So after we've given individuals some time to complete the starter kit, those 3 pages, pages 3 through 5, we ask for a period of reflection. What surprised you? What didn't surprise you? Did anything come up that was a concern? Did it lead to more questions? As I'm sure it probably did. So we allow people to take some time individually to complete the kit. And then what we do is, if you remember that photo that we showed in the beginning, individuals were clustered into tables. What we then say is, after you've taken the time to complete your own pages, share with the people at your table, share with the person next to you. Reflect in these questions on these ways with the people in your small group. And we take about 5 to 10 minutes or so to let people reflect in their small groups. And then what we do is we open it up to the larger group, and we let, depending on what you feel is appropriate, 2, 3, 4, however many feels right, people share with the larger group some things that may have popped up for them in completing those 3 pages. And here you can see exactly what I've just described. Individuals completing the kit real time at a workshop, thinking through their wishes, and then they'll take some time to reflect in their small groups and then share with the larger group. So these are answers and things that came up to the Conversation Project when they posed the question to the nation. They said, what matters to you at the end of life? And people wrote in different responses based on what was important to them. One person said they want to make sure they can listen to 90s music. Another person said they want to make sure it's peaceful. Some people want to be surrounded by family. Another woman, it may seem like a joke, but this was very important to her. She said, make sure my sheets are untucked around my feet. She did not like having her feet enclosed And so if she's not able to speak for herself, she wants her family to know that is important to me. So it can really be anything that you would want your loved ones and your providers to know matters to you if you're not able to communicate that. And this Wordle shows us the answers to those questions that the Conversation Project posed about what matters most. This is how people responded and what they submitted and sent in. I don't know that any of us are surprised that peaceful is one of the most popular and most commonly given responses, with family and friends being comfortable, painless, but we also see laughter in there, filled with music, jokey. There's different things that folks want to see and have happen toward the end of their life. And this was just another way to demonstrate that even though it's varied, all of us have something that matters most to us. And so now we would move forward with the kit after we've taken that reflection time and move to the section marked Go on pages 6 through 8. And this is where individuals will take some time to identify who they would actually want to have this conversation with. They've spent some time thinking about their own wishes, and now who are you going to tell those wishes to? A parent, a spouse, a child? The kit just provides you with a place to write down some of those thoughts. It also asks you when would be a good time to talk. Someone that I spoke with said they've been turning their birthday into a time where they ask for different things that are important to be done. And so they said, make this my birthday next year. This is my birthday gift. You can give me the gift of listening to what my care preferences are. So you can also write here about a good time to bring these conversations up with your loved ones. So a few final tips during this period of completing the kit and reflection. Make sure your participants are giving current answers. Oftentimes people will say, well, when I'm 90, this is what I would want to happen. Or if I was very sick, this is what I would want to happen. And we don't want people to think in those terms because really anything could happen to any of us at any time. So we want you to be completing the kit as if you're answering for yourself today. What would be your wishes today? Make sure the person that you want to choose as your healthcare agent can honor your wishes. Sometimes, for example, a spouse may say, I would really want to have a natural death. If the doctors are saying, I will no longer be able to speak, I will no longer be able to walk, I will not recognize my family, I would like you to stop all medical intervention. And perhaps their partner says, I could never do that to you. I would never give up on you. I would never be able to honor that wish. There's nothing wrong with that person acknowledging that they don't want to honor that wish, but perhaps a different individual should be chosen to be the healthcare agent to make sure that those care preferences can be honored. Having more than one conversation. It's very important for you to tell more than just one person what your care wishes are. Let's say, for example, you have multiple children and you've chosen one to be your healthcare agent, but you haven't told your other children that you've chosen this one person to be your agent. If a time comes when you're unable to speak for yourself, it's important for your other children to know that you've spoken with, shared your wishes, and had a conversation with the person you're choosing as your agent. And they should know your care preferences too. You don't want to put your family in a situation where only one person knows what your wishes are and only one person knows they've been chosen to be the agent. Lastly, I'll mention be wary of vague phrases or things that sound like whole enchiladas or pulling the plug. Sometimes we hear people say, I want everything, I want the whole enchilada, or don't do anything, pull the plug on me. Well, what does that mean? That doesn't help your loved ones know what a quality life means to you. That doesn't help your loved ones know what matters most to you. So if someone is speaking in those terms, dig a little bit deeper because we really want to get at the heart of what is of value to them, what matters most to them. So now I want to read a letter, again, courtesy of the Conversation Project, that a woman sent to her family members, to her children, to ease their burden when it came to actually acting out her end-of-life wishes. And the letter reads, "It's okay, a letter to my family. If you are faced with a decision that you're not ready for, it's okay. I'll try to let you know what I would want for various circumstances. But if you come to something we haven't anticipated, it's okay. And if you come to a decision point and what you decide results in my death, it's okay. You don't need to worry that you've caused my death. You haven't. I will die because of my illness or my body failing or whatever. You don't need to feel responsible. Forgiveness is not required. But if you feel bad, responsible, guilty, first of all, don't, and second of all, you are loved and forgiven. If you're faced with a snap decision, don't panic. Choose comfort. Choose home. Choose less intervention. Choose to be together at my side, holding my hand, singing, laughing, loving, celebrating, and carrying on. I will keep loving you and watching you and being proud of you. So what a remarkable gift for her to give her family the peace of knowing that they were honoring her wishes and it was okay, the decisions they were making on her behalf. And so one last video that you might choose to show during this portion of your workshop is another courtesy of the Conversation Project, and it's a story of a woman who, toward the end of her life, one of her last wishes was to sing again. She was a jazz singer and she hadn't sung in many years. And though this is a story, about a 4-minute video of a doctor who was able to allow her to sing and create a space where she could do that one more time. So again, it's just another way of showing that what matters most to someone, showing that what matters most to them, and then also showing the healthcare community, encouraging and helping that person live that out. So again, it's another video that you may choose to show during your workshop. And then as you close things out, it would be important to reiterate why we're all here today, the Speakeasy Howard campaign, and what we're encouraging our residents to do, which is to name their healthcare agent. Again, if you recall, the 2 things that the campaign focuses on is talking with your loved ones, sharing those care preferences, and then also appointing your healthcare agent. And when you do appoint your healthcare agent on the Speakeasy Howard website, that information is securely available to all healthcare providers in Maryland. The state of Maryland has been quite progressive in creating a space where advance directives can be communicated to healthcare providers securely and easily. So if you take the time to actually appoint your agent, if you do that through Speakeasy Howard, then that information again is securely available to healthcare providers through the system set up by the state of Maryland. So we are lucky to live here where that is available, and it also allows you to take the step of ensuring that your providers will have your documents more easily. So let's recap and talk a little bit about the logistics of hosting your workshop. Again, this is a still of one of the workshops that was held a few years ago. You can see people clustered around tables. They are looking at the conversation starter kit in this portion of the workshop, and they're taking time to personally write down some of their own care preferences. And so as you set up your own space and your own workshop, keep these things in mind. Workshops can be approximately 90 minutes. They can go shorter or longer, depending on how much of the starter kit you want to go through during the session. Also, sometimes people will help individuals complete their healthcare agent forms in real time, and will ask folks to either go to the website or complete the form in front of them at the workshop. And that may make it a little bit longer, but it helps you help your community take that last step. A workshop can be just a few people, or it can be up to 50 or so participants. We don't encourage going too much bigger than that because we do have those periods of reflecting to the group. And if you have 100 or 150 people in a room, that can be a little bit tough. It also tends to work with a more intimate setting. So we would say about 50 or so would be the max. And if you get to those larger groups, consider having 2 or 3 facilitators. That way you can trade off. Perhaps one person will share about the data at the beginning, then another person can acknowledge that this is a tough situation, a tough topic, and maybe share a personal story, and someone else can trade off and move through the workshop. So we encourage a few people for larger groups. The materials that you'll need are a Speakeasy Howard flyer to start. We always try to provide something that gives an overview of the Speakeasy Howard campaign, since that is the campaign here in Howard County, and we want people to be familiar with that language and to know what's going on here in the community. You'll also need a conversation starter kit so that people can obviously sit down and work through those questions that we saw. So everyone will need their own kit. You want to have pens so that folks can write. AV equipment so that you can play some of those videos that we shared, and also access to the internet so you can pull up the Speakeasy Howard website and show people how they can go on to begin thinking about their wishes, and then more importantly, to name their agent once they've completed that step. Something to note, all the flyers and starter kits that you would need are available on the Speakeasy Howard website and can be printed from there. Logistically, you might want to consider if you need microphones also. Perhaps the room is very large, and if you do have 50 participants, when they reflect out to the group, it may be hard to hear if they don't have a microphone. Or it may be hard to hear you and your facilitators if you're not mic'd as well. Consider that. And I highly recommend having a slide advancer because you want to be able to move about the room and you want to be able to interact with the group. And so having that will help you be able to move through your slides more cleanly. Lastly, as you probably saw in that photo, encourage all the seats to face forward. So if you have round tables, still consider only putting 4 or so chairs at each table, all facing forward. That way, all participants can watch you and the facilitators as you go through the slides, but then also it doesn't make your tables too large when you're doing that small group reflection. And this is just another example of how the tables can be set up. It's not a round table, but they were smaller tables that allowed 3 individuals per table. That's how we set it up. You'll see the Speakeasy Howard flyer there at the top with blue in the background, and then you see the conversation starter kit. And then you also see pens on the table. And that's really all you need to be able to get this started and to create a space where participants can begin thinking about their wishes. In real time, another example of how it might look, you see that we have the Speakeasy Howard slides up behind us in this room. We had speakers so that we could play the videos. I did use a slide advancer. We had 3 people for a table, and the workshop lasted about 75 minutes. So everything that we've talked through here is exactly how you would execute it to look something like this for your own event. So lastly, we just want to thank you for being a Speakeasy Howard partner, being willing to host your own workshop, your own event, to encourage residents here in the community to engage in this important topic. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us at info@speakeasyhoward.org. But remember, we're all here to make sure we're all heard, even when we can't speak for ourselves. And so thank you for helping us do that.